What do we got? Old John Jones tears his pec tendon off the bone, eh? Him and Stipe no longer fighting at UFC 295. That sucks. You see the footage of him wrestling his training partner Maurice Green, former UFC heavyweight, and he he's got the body lock, and then he shoots down for the double leg or whatever, and tears the pec. It's pretty rough, 8 months to a year, or 8 months I think they say, before he's back training. And it's funny actually, because I did exactly the same thing as a meathead white belt, not tapping to a Kimura. Shout out Matt Keeley. And yeah, it's so mine snapped, the whole thing snapped off, and the tendon itself pulls itself back over and into your chest somewhere, and they open you up and they have to find it and drag it back across, and then they make a little groove in the bone where they tuck the tendon back into, and then cap it out, put like a little plate more or less with screws. This is one way to do it. There's other ways. This is a keyhole surgery. There's other ways to do it as well, I think, and then they cap it off while the tendon's in there, and you're slung up for quite a while, no movement until that heals up, and then you're strengthening from there. But yeah, at 36 years old, I wouldn't be surprised if, you might not, I don't know if we'll ever see him and Stipe fight. He might come back and fight whoever's the champ, depending on who the champ is, I can imagine. But that might be the last time we see John. We'll soon see, I guess. And Stipe, 41, 42 years old, could be the same thing. We might never see him fight again either, which is a shame. So they've replaced that main event with Sergey Spivak, who I have a feeling was already the replacement fighter for the matchup anyway. They've replaced that fight with not Sergey Spivak. There's so many guys from that part of the world with similar names. Sergey Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall from the UK, who's coming off an injury himself. I think he's been back, had one fight against Marcin Tybura since he had a leg injury versus Curtis Blades. So Sergey Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall replaces John Jones versus Stipe Miocic, UFC 295. And I see that the co-main, Yuri Prohaska versus Alex Pereira, which was the co-main when John was on the card, has now taken the main event slot. So we've got Yuri Prohaska and Alex Poatan Pereira for the main event at UFC 295 now, that's a cool fight. But unfortunately, the rest of that card is pretty light. But yeah, we'll see. No UFC this weekend though. So we've got what is it? Ngannou versus Tyson Fury is probably the highlight of the weekend, eh? I think we all know it's not. I think one of the main talking points over the last week or so is the fact that it's not actually a boxing match. It's not actually counting on Tyson's record. There's no belt on the line. It's not a professional boxing match. And Ngannou, we all know, is not a boxer, although he had originally, after making his way from the sand mines of Cameroon, he wanted to become a boxer, but found his way into MMA and obviously had a lot of success there, being the UFC heavyweight champion, having fights with the likes of Stipe Miocic, and just basically wreaking havoc on the heavyweight division in the UFC. And then had contractual disagreements with the UFC. He'd wanting to box, obviously, with the whole YouTube boxing sensation and all of these crossover boxing matches that have been happening lately, he really wanted to get involved in that, or probably not so much even the YouTube aspect, but more he wanted to box and at least have the opportunity to have a boxing match. And the UFC wasn't having it, so they went back and forth for about a year or so debating contracts. And yes, he is going to fight John Jones, and which that would have been a fight for old John Jones' debut against Francis Ngannou. But anyway, they can't come to terms, and Ngannou and the UFC part ways. And he actually signed with the PFL, which is another MMA organisation, also under the ESPN banner, same as the UFC, which is interesting. So he's a fighter for the PFL now, and they've allowed him to fight Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury fighting, let's say, interestingly, Tyson Fury, the lineal boxing heavyweight champion, fighting the UFC's lineal heavyweight champion in what we all know is just it's basically, what can we call it? It's a circus match, more or less. You can always give Francis the puncher's chance, but it's pretty slim chance. We all know Tyson, although he's a bit of a goofball, is arguably the greatest heavyweight boxer we've seen. He kind of put a bad taste in people's mouths earlier in the year when he was not willing to sign for the Usyk fight, which if he was to beat Usyk, he'd really been carving out a name as the greatest heavyweight. Obviously, there's likes of Muhammad Ali and stuff in the past, but he's definitely he's getting up into those echelons now. So the chances that Francis Ngannou was going to go in there and have any chance in a boxing match is pretty slim. But it kind of puts salt in the wound, the fact that he's fighting Ngannou and he's got his Usyk fight booked for later in the year as well. But Francis, to be fair, I can imagine most of the motivation for Francis here, although I'm sure he's competitive and he doesn't want to go out there and make a dick of himself in the fight. Most of the motivation is probably on the business side of things, as far as, he knows that he can go and make this massive, life-changing, for him and future generations of his family type of money in boxing events. And the UFC ain't going to let him. So he's like, I know I can do it. And he's backed himself, as he's done in fights. We all know he's had injuries leading up to some of his last UFC fights, which he fought through to then win, and on last fight contracts, last fights of his UFC contracts, like rolling the dice. So that's kind of what he does. He backs himself, and that's obviously what he's done in a business standpoint here to go and get this Tyson Fury fight. I can't imagine he's deluding himself that he's a better boxer or has a chance to even become as good of a boxer as Tyson Fury, but like we say, there's always the puncher's chance. So it'll be interesting to watch. I'm definitely going to watch it. The Saudis, sports washing, just pumping money into fight sports. The UFC was there. Obviously that was Abu Dhabi. I think Tyson Fury's in Saudi Arabia, but the Middle East, man, a lot of fights happening over there at the moment. A lot of money getting given to fight organisations over there at the moment. So that should be interesting. I'd say Tyson will get it, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was not that interesting of a fight. I'd hate to see Tyson really clown him around, but he might do that. But who knows? We'll soon see. So I guess that's more or less it for today, team. No UFC this weekend. Next week, no doubt, I'll make a video leading up to the UFC Derek Lewis versus Jailton Almeida, although that's a bit of a meh card, so who knows. But the Black Beast. He's not much old. Rodolfo Vieira. Who else is on there? Oh, Vince Pichel. OG.